We want to go in depth on the impact that the Facebook whistleblower could have on social media regulation. We're joined now by Adam Durfee, the social media director at Bondcom. Adam, good afternoon, and thank you for being with us today. So we hear that word regulation so often. What could regulation look like here when it comes to Facebook and really this social media empire they have?
Well, hey, I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? Everybody here, they should get regulated, they should get whatever. And what does that mean to us? And what we're looking at here, at least specifically, and what we've heard come off Capitol Hill so far, is people are saying, hey, we want to see Facebook moderated. We want to see all the content that goes on Facebook, Instagram, wherever. We want to see that gets looked at, that gets taken down if this is hate speech or violent or hurtful to somebody. We've also seen people say maybe algorithmically based content or content feeds at all should be done away with. And so we're starting to look at that sort of regulation, Section 230, Communications Decency Act, like those sorts of things are what appear to be the target right now of proposed regulation.
When we talk about those regulations, could freedom of speech issues actually pop up in these hearings when it comes to kind of regulating that type of speech out there on social media?
Yeah, that's definitely the target of what we're saying is, and you'll see the First Amendment's going to get pulled a lot over the next few days, few weeks, I would even say, that we're going to say, is it okay to say whatever we want to say, or is it okay, or even the responsibility of a private company like Facebook to be pulling things off, to be moderating what's being said on their channels? And is it a responsibility? Is it their duty? In fact, will it become the law that that's something that they need to do? And that's the fight that we're going to see coming over the next little bit.
You know, just in watching television the past few months, there's been a big ad blitz from Facebook talking about regulation. Is this something that they are okay with? Do they want to see regulation, or do they kind of want to control how this regulation plays out?
For the most part, they're going to want to self-impose that type of regulation. This is the sort of situation where I think a lot of players in this space aren't recognizing the size of the problem they're trying to tackle. Right, we're looking at 250,000 photos being uploaded to this platform every 60 seconds. Add in articles being shared, text updates, videos, stories, etc., and we're getting more than 500,000 pieces of content every 60 seconds. And so when we talk about regulating that, moderating that, taking care of that, the question I want to turn back onto people is, okay, I think most people agree that we want to be careful about what goes on platforms, but how do you do that? How do you monitor 500,000 posts every 60 seconds in over 100 different languages? And what does that look like? And who's best suited to even try to attempt something like that?
You know, 20 years ago, Facebook wasn't even around, but they've been around now for about 15 years. They've, of course, exploded in popularity. Why has it taken so long to get to this point?
You know, Facebook has just an absolute knack for making sure that they seem to be at the top of every negative headline. We know this is not the first time, as you just mentioned, 15 years that social media has existed. You know, a lot of this came to a head in the 2016 Cambridge Analytica case. That sort of put Facebook ahead of Twitter or these other big content aggregators online as being sort of a target for this. But the reality is people have been talking for, long times, whether they're at tables or in group text messages or wherever. And Facebook has just turned these conversations and made them public. And some would say this has been a good thing. It's given me a voice, you a voice. People who maybe didn't have platforms before to speak and now have that opportunity to speak. But with the flip side of that, we have this sort of question we're now asking, which is, okay, but should we be able to say anything that we want? And Facebook, as the most highly adopted of all these social media platforms on planet Earth, has become the platform in the crosshairs for that exact question.
So you mentioned that Facebook knows how to be the center of negative headlines. They are in the spotlight right now. So the heat is on. So what's the timeline look like? When might we see something being done, some regulations being rolled out that might control, what happens on that platform?
You know, this is such an interesting question to ask, right? And I think it actually goes really fun in tandem with 2 days ago when the platform goes offline, right? 3 days ago, after the 60 Minutes interview, you hear the world out there saying, oh man, Facebook's the worst and it should go down and everybody should leave it and blah, blah, blah. Well, it goes down the next day and all of a sudden the narrative changes and everybody's like, man, I can't believe Facebook's down. I can't believe Instagram's down or WhatsApp is down. How do we communicate? This is crazy. And so I sort of use that anecdotally to say, I don't know if we're truly going to see large-scale regulation come through for this. I think over the next few weeks, we'll see plenty of debates. And I think in principle and in concept, really well-meaning. I mean, I'd be the first one to raise my hand to say, let's get hate speech off platforms. Let's make sure that content is not harming teenagers or youth. I think that's all great. But the idea of how do you actually do that? how do you regulate this much content? And if Facebook has to do it, well, does every other social media platform has to do it? Do AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, carriers that might carry messages on their platforms, do they have to do it? I sort of think that the actual argument here gets to be so big, so tremendous, and so much content that I'm not convinced in some sort of single swoop regulation that this is actually a problem that we could look to solve. And so because of that, we might find a lot of these proposed regulations starting to butt their heads into walls or starting to stall out when we realize that no one has come up with solutions for this type of thing yet.
And just a few more seconds left here, but really quickly, how much money is on the line here when it comes to regulations? I mean, Facebook is a multi-billion-dollar company, so there's, I'm sure, a lot on the line for them right now.
Yeah, and you hit, I mean, I think we've even hit $1 trillion with Facebook. And you're looking at billions and billions of ad revenue that disappears if you can't get eyeballs on the newsfeed, right? The algorithmic newsfeed we're using, the MSIs that draw that, that's what gets people there, looking at ads, clicking on ads, pushing that through. That's the grand majority of all Facebook revenue. And you're looking at billions of dollars loss if they can't keep people engaged on that platform, or if regulation comes in and eliminates or greatly diminishes the ability to do that.
Well, Adam Durfee, a very interesting subject right now, and definitely in the headlines. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us here this afternoon.
Appreciate you having me.